100 strangers, drinking on my dock, and I wasn't invited. I drove back to my lake house expecting silence, but a valet in a black vest stopped me at my own gate. Behind him, champagne, music, and 100 strangers standing on land I paid for. Karen said the HOA approved it, said I could come back tomorrow. I didn't argue. I just said understood. And right there, I started counting. If you've ever had someone cross a line they had no right to touch, stay with me. And if you respect standing your ground the right way, go ahead and subscribe. You'll want to see how this one ends. I knew something was wrong before I even reached the gate. Not because of noise. There wasn't any loud music, no shouting, nothing that would have carried across the water. It was the cars. Too many of them, lined up along the gravel shoulder like a parade I hadn't agreed to host. Black sedans, polished SUVs, a catering van with its engine still ticking as it cooled. I slowed my truck as the tires rolled over the last stretch of County Road, the familiar bend opening up to my gate, and then I saw him. 19, maybe 20. Black vest, white shirt, clip-on tie that didn't quite sit straight. He stepped forward like he'd rehearsed it, one hand raised just enough to stop me without looking aggressive. "Sir," he said, polite and practiced, "do you have a name on the list?" For a second, I thought I'd taken a wrong turn. Then I looked past him, through my gate, across my land, and that's when it settled in. My lake, 200 feet of private shoreline, was filled with people I didn't recognize. Men in pastel shirts standing on my dock like it was a resort platform. Women in cocktail dresses walking across the grass I'd reseeded last spring. Someone laughed too loudly near the water, the sound sharp against the stillness that used to live here. And stretched across my front porch, tied from post to post, was a banner big enough to catch the wind. Lakeshore Pines. HOA Summer Gala 2024. 18 Mercer Shore Drive. My address, printed in bold like an invitation. I let the engine idle. Didn't say anything yet. The kid held his position, clipboard in hand, smile still there, but tighter now, uncertain. "Sir," he repeated, softer this time, "I just need your name to check you in." "This is my property," I said. He nodded, like I'd told him something mildly inconvenient. "Of course, sir. I just need to confirm your name is on the guest list." Behind him, another car pulled up. A couple stepped out, dressed like they were headed to a wedding, and handed him their names without hesitation. He checked the list, smiled, and waved them through my gate. My gate. They walked past my mailbox like it belonged to them. I cut the engine. The quiet that followed wasn't the kind I was used to. It was crowded, full of voices that didn't belong, footsteps where there shouldn't have been any, glass clinking on a dock I'd rebuilt board by board 2 summers ago. Then I saw her. Karen Holloway stepped out from the side path like she'd been waiting for the moment. Navy blue cocktail dress, clipboard tucked under her arm. That same smile she used at HOA meetings when she thought she'd already won the vote. "Daniel," she said, bright as porch light, "you made it." I didn't answer. She came closer, heels steady on the stone walkway I'd laid myself. "Oh," she added, tilting her head like she'd just realized something amusing. "You didn't get the final notice, did you?" "What notice?" "The event approval," she said. "The board voted weeks ago. Community Summer Gala. We needed a proper lakeside venue and, well, yours was the obvious choice." She said it like she'd done me a favor. I looked past her again. A server pushed a stainless steel cart straight through the line of hostas near the porch. Another group leaned against the railing of my dock, glasses in hand, watching the sunset like they owned the view. "You didn't have permission," I said. Karen's smile didn't drop. It just changed, tightened at the corners, sharpened. "We sent communication," she replied, "multiple times. If you chose not to respond, that's not on us. I told you no, in writing." She waved a hand like she was brushing off dust. "Well," she said, "the board interpreted your silence this time as non-objection. We can't stall community events indefinitely." I let that sit. Behind her, a man I recognized, Greg Patterson, HOA board member, raised his phone and took a picture of my truck. Didn't even try to hide it. Just smiled when he saw me notice. Karen followed my glance, then leaned in slightly. "If you're concerned about disruption," she said, lowering her voice just enough to sound reasonable, "you're welcome to wait inside the clubhouse until midnight. Or come back in the morning. We'll have everything cleaned up by then." She paused, studying my face. "And Daniel?" she added, softer still. "Let's not make a scene in front of guests. We do have an off-duty officer on site for event support." There it was. Not a request. A warning. I'd seen that expression before. In depositions. In negotiations. That calm certainty people wear when they believe no one's going to challenge them. Karen was wearing it now. I checked the time on my dashboard. 5:47 p.m. Then I looked again. At the banner. At the clipboard in the valet's hand. Names written in 2 different inks. At Greg still holding his phone. At the deputy by the side entrance, leaning against a food truck, eating shrimp off a toothpick like none of this concerned him. I took it all in, every detail. Then I opened the door and stepped out. The gravel crunched under my boots. The air smelled like citrus and alcohol and something burning too hot on a catering tray. Someone laughed again, louder this time. Karen straightened, ready for whatever she thought I was about to say. I didn't raise my voice, didn't argue, didn't explain. I just looked at her and said one word. "Understood." Her smile widened instantly. Relief, victory, confirmation of everything she believed about me. "Thank you," she said, already turning away. "We appreciate cooperation." Like she was thanking a dog for sitting. I got back in my truck, shifted into reverse, backed up slow, 50 feet, maybe a little more, until I cleared the gate completely. Then I pulled off to the side of the county road and parked where the gravel met public land. No HOA authority, no interpretation, just dirt, boundary lines, and law. I shut off the engine, and I watched. One car at a time they kept arriving, names checked, smiles exchanged, doors opened and closed. People stepped onto my land without hesitation, without question, like it belonged to someone else. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the small digital recorder I used for site inspections, turned it on, set it on the dashboard. Then I opened the gate camera app on my phone. The one Karen didn't know existed. License plates started logging immediately. Timestamps, entry angles, faces, all of it. 3 years ago, before I bought this place, I'd walked every inch of the boundary with the original 1968 survey map in my hand. I'd read every page of the HOA bylaws on a quiet Saturday morning, highlighter in one hand, coffee in the other. Because after 22 years practicing property law, I'd learned one thing about people like Karen Holloway. Give them enough time, and eventually, they get bold. Tonight, she got bold. She just didn't realize what she'd handed me. I watched another car roll through my gate. The valet greeted them by name. Karen had made a list, typed it somewhere, saved it somewhere, sent it somewhere. And every version of that list still existed. I picked up a yellow legal pad from the passenger seat and wrote the date across the top. Under it, in ink. Lakeshore Pines HOA John Doe's, approximately 100. Then I leaned back in the seat, eyes on the house I owned but couldn't enter, and let the night play out exactly the way they wanted it to. Because in my line of work, the worst thing you can do is interrupt a mistake before it's finished building itself. And Karen Holloway? She wasn't even close to finished yet. I stayed parked on the county shoulder long after the sun dropped behind the ridge. The lake went from gold to black, but the lights on my property kept multiplying. Strings of bulbs stretched across my porch. Portable lamps lit the dock. Someone had even run extension cables along the path I'd laid stone by stone, like they'd always planned to use it. Like this had been theirs all along. Cars kept arriving. The valet, same kid, same vest, checked names, nodded, waved people through. Efficient, organized. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake. This was planned. I tapped the screen on my phone and switched camera angles. Front gate, side approach, driveway. Each feed time-stamped automatically. Each entry logged. Plates, faces, direction of travel. Every person who crossed that gate did it on record. I zoomed in on the clipboard in the valet's hand when he leaned closer to a couple stepping out of a black SUV. 2 columns. Names written in blue ink, some added later in black. Late additions. Last-minute confirmations. A list built over time. A list that existed somewhere beyond that clipboard. Email, laptop, HOA records. I watched another group step through the gate. A man laughed, already drunk, holding a glass that caught the light just right as he turned toward my dock. My dock. I leaned back in the seat and let the recorder run. No shouting, no confrontation. Just voices, names, movement. Clean, documented, useful. For a moment, I thought about walking back up there. Not to argue, just to stand on my own porch and let them see it. Let them realize they'd crossed a line. But I didn't, because that would have ended it too early. And right now they were still building something. Something bigger than trespass. Something I could use. A memory surfaced without asking permission. 3 summers ago, Karen standing in the clubhouse parking lot, holding a folder like it meant something. "Daniel," she'd said, smiling that same practiced smile. "We're organizing a small 4th of July gathering. Nothing disruptive, just neighbors coming together. Your lakefront would be perfect." "No," I'd told her. "Not rude, not loud, just clear. I don't host events on my property." She'd nodded like she understood, like she respected it. Then 2 months later, another request. Different angle, different phrasing. Community benefit. Shared space. Temporary use. No. Again. Every time I answered in writing when I could. Short, direct. "Please do not list my property as an event location. I do not consent to any HOA use of my land." 11 emails over 3 years. Saved, archived, time-stamped. I hadn't needed them back then, but I kept them anyway. Habit. Now, watching strangers walk across my lawn like it belonged to them, I understood why. Karen hadn't stopped asking. She'd just stopped waiting for answers. I switched to the rear camera feed. More plates. I started reading them out loud, quietly, so the recorder would pick them up. Colorado, KLM 4721. Wyoming, 9TR883. Utah, HJX 119. Not because I needed to remember them, because I wanted a second record. Redundancy matters when things go to court. A catering truck rolled in next. The logo on the side was clear enough to read even in low light. They parked near the side path, unloading trays, equipment, crates of glassware. Business entities. Insured. Traceable. I made a note on the pad. vendors. Identify separately. Another detail. Another layer. The party grew louder as the night deepened. Music started, low at first, then louder, carrying across the water. Someone cheered. Someone dropped something that shattered on stone. Still, no one looked toward the road. No one asked the only question that mattered. Whose place is this? I watched Karen move through the crowd, confident, in control. She stopped to greet people, touch shoulders, laugh at things that weren't funny. Every gesture said the same thing. She believed this was hers to manage, not mine to defend. Greg Patterson drifted near the porch, talking to a group of guests, pointing toward the lake like he was giving a tour. I zoomed in. He gestured toward the dock, then toward the house, then back toward the water. Selling it. Framing it. Making it sound like an amenity. I wrote his name down again, just to be sure it stayed where I needed it. The hours passed. I didn't move, didn't eat, didn't check the time again. Just watched, counted, recorded. By the time the first cars started leaving, I had 97 distinct plates logged. 5 more I marked as likely vendors, based on arrival time and parking position. The number settled in my head. 100. Close enough. The last group lingered near the dock, voices softer now, slower. Someone stumbled. Someone laughed again. Then, eventually, the lights began to go out. One string at a time, one cluster of voices at a time, until the property went quiet again. Not my kind of quiet, but close. I turned off the recorder, closed the camera app, and sat there for another minute, looking through the windshield at the outline of the house. My house. Occupied, used, and emptied without permission. I didn't feel anger the way most people would. No rush, no heat, just something colder, cleaner, like a problem that had finally revealed its full shape. I started the engine, didn't drive through the gate, didn't go inside. Instead, I pulled back onto the county road and headed toward town. 40 minutes out, there's a Hampton Inn just off the highway. Anonymous. Predictable. I paid cash at the desk. No receipt tied to a card. No record someone could pull later and spin into a story about where I'd been or what I'd done. Control matters, even in small things. The room smelled like cleaning solution and stale air. I set the legal pad on the desk, sat down, and started writing. Everything. The valet, age, posture, exact words. Karen, first sentence, second sentence, tone. Greg, phone raised, deliberate. The deputy, position, behavior, what he didn't do. The banner, size, placement, wording. Timestamps, movements. Details most people forget by morning. I didn't give myself that chance. 6 pages. Then I picked up the phone and called my office voicemail. Spoke the same account out loud. Time stamped by the system. Corroboration. When I finished, I sat there for a second, pen still in my hand. Then I flipped to a new page. At the top, I wrote, Defendants. To be identified below it, I drew 2 columns. Individuals. Entities. Because this wasn't just about Karen anymore. She'd invited them, directed them, led them onto my land. But they still walked in, stayed, drank, used. Every one of them made a choice, and choices have consequences. I set the pen down, leaned back in the chair, and closed my eyes for a moment. Not to rest, just to see it clearly. The gate, the list, the banner, the dock. All of it fitting together. By the time I opened my eyes again, The shape of the case was already there. Clean. Simple. I reached for the pad one more time and wrote a single line under the heading. Estimated count. 100, then I circled it. Because tomorrow morning I wasn't going back to argue. I was going back to collect. And this time I wouldn't be the one asking permission. I pulled up just after sunrise. No valet, no music, no voices. Just my gate, half open, like it had been left that way on purpose, like whoever closed it last didn't think it mattered anymore. I drove through without stopping. The first thing I noticed wasn't the damage, it was the silence. Not the kind I'd built this place for. Not the steady, clean quiet of water and distance. This one felt used, like something had passed through and taken the stillness with it. Then I stepped out of the truck and saw it. My dock. 2 rail sections snapped clean at the joints, not weathered, not worn. Fresh breaks. Splintered wood still pale against the darker grain. Someone had leaned too hard, or too many had leaned at once. I didn't touch it. I walked past it. The lawn told the rest of the story. Burn marks, round, about the size of serving trays, scattered across the grass. Not random. Placed. Someone had set down hot equipment without thinking twice. The roots beneath were already darkening. Flower beds, flattened. Hostas bent over at the stems, some ripped halfway out. Dirt still clinging to exposed roots. Tire tracks cut through the edge of the planting line, shallow but clear. Movement without care. Use without permission. I stopped at the edge of the porch. A wine glass sat on the railing, lipstick still visible. Next to it, a torn piece of fabric, tie maybe, caught on a nail I hadn't gotten around to pulling last spring. Evidence doesn't announce itself. It waits. I pulled my phone out and opened the camera. Timestamp on. GPS metadata active. First photo, wide angle. Entire dock, full frame. Second, closer. Breakpoint on the railing. Third, angle from below, capturing the lake behind it to establish orientation. I moved methodically. No guessing. No skipping. Every shot had a purpose. I measured the broken rail, distance between posts, height from deck, angle of failure. Not because I needed the number now, because I would need it later. Because consistency matters when someone tries to argue that damage was already there. I stepped back onto the grass. Burn mark. Photographed from 3 angles. Measured diameter. Captured surrounding area for scale. Then the flower beds. Then the tracks. Then the scattered trash near the shoreline. Plastic cups, napkins half soaked. Something metallic I didn't bother picking up yet. I didn't clean anything. Didn't move anything. Because the moment you restore a scene, you lose part of it. And right now, this wasn't my property. It was a record. I moved along the edge of the lake, scanning for anything that stood out. There it was, near the far corner of the fence line. Something no one bothers to look for until it matters. Proof of use. Proof of presence. Proof of how far they'd gone. I took the photos. No reaction. No commentary. Just documentation. 2 hours passed like that. Not fast. Not slow. Just precise. By the time I finished, I had over 100 images stored, each one tagged, each one placed exactly where it needed to be. Then I went inside. Not to rest. To check. The front room still smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and alcohol. No signs of entry. They hadn't gone inside. That told me something. They knew enough to stay out of the house, but not enough to stay off the land. I stepped back out onto the porch, and that's when I heard it. Engine. Low. Mechanical. Close. I turned. A bobcat rolled up my driveway like it belonged there. Behind it, a pickup truck. 3 men, and stepping down from the driver's side, Rick Holloway, Karen's husband. He looked exactly like I remembered. Late 50s, sunburn across the back of his neck, polo shirt with his company logo stitched over the chest. Whitfield and Sons Landscaping. He walked toward me like we were about to discuss a routine job. "Daniel," he said, easy tone like nothing had happened. "Karen sent us. We'll have this cleaned up in an hour. Lawn will look better than it did yesterday." I didn't move, didn't greet him, didn't step aside. "Don't touch anything," I said. He blinked. "Sorry?" "You heard me." He glanced back at his crew, then back at me. "Look, the HOA approved the cleanup," he said. "It's community responsibility. We're just fixing what got... This is private property." That slowed him down, not stopped, just slowed. His smile didn't disappear. It adjusted. "Daniel," he said, lowering his voice slightly, "we're trying to help here. No need to make this difficult. People are already talking. No reason to escalate." I stepped forward just enough to close the distance between us. "Everything on this land stays exactly where it is today," I said. "If you or your crew cross that line," I pointed to the edge of the driveway, "I document it, and I add it to what I'm already building." The word sat there for a second. Building. He understood it. Not fully, but enough. His eyes shifted, not toward me, toward the camera mounted under the eave, then toward the gate, then back again. "Karen's not going to like that," he said. "I'm not asking her to." Silence. Short, measured. Then he turned slightly toward his crew. "Load it up," he said. No argument, no pushback. The man with the blower shut it off. The other one set the rake down. The Bobcat reversed slowly, beeping as it backed out of my driveway. Rick lingered half a second longer before climbing back into the truck. "Just so you know," he added, window halfway down, "you're making this bigger than it needs to be." I nodded once. "That's the point." He didn't respond, just drove. I stood there until the truck disappeared past the bend. Then I turned back to the property, took 11 more photos, wide shots, boundary lines visible, clear evidence that they had arrived, and just as clear that they hadn't crossed. Not yet. I went back inside, set my phone on the table, and started organizing the files. Dock, lawn, structures, foreign objects. Everything categorized, everything labeled. No gaps, no confusion. At 10:12 a.m., I created a new folder, named it Incident, Lakeshore Pines HO. Then I added a subfolder, Unauthorized Cleanup Attempt. Because what Rick Holloway had just tried to do wasn't maintenance. It was interference. And interference, documented correctly, doesn't weaken a case. It strengthens it. I sat down, looked at the screen, and let the pieces settle. Trespass, damage, unauthorized use, attempted alteration of evidence. It was no longer just a party. It was a pattern. And patterns are what courts pay attention to. I leaned back in the chair, hands still, mind already moving forward, because this morning hadn't been about anger or retaliation. It had been about confirmation. They didn't think I'd push back. They didn't think I'd build anything from it. And now, Saul, they'd just confirmed I could. The question wasn't whether I had a case, it was how big it was going to be, and who exactly was going to be part of it. Karen answered that question faster than I expected. By noon, there was a notice taped to my mailbox. Not slipped inside, not mailed, taped, visible from the road, deliberate. I walked out, peeled it off clean, and read it standing right there in the gravel. Notice of hostile conduct issued by Lakeshore Pines. A president, Karen Holloway. The language was precise in the way bad legal writing often is, confident without authority, structured without substance. It accused me of interfering with community maintenance operations, of harassing HOA contractors, of creating a hostile environment for residents and service personnel. And then it got to the part that mattered. A fine of $500 per day, effective immediately, with a warning that continued non-compliance could result in a lien being placed against my property. I read it once, then again, not because I needed to understand it, but because I wanted to be certain of what she'd just done. Signed, dated, printed on HOA letterhead. I folded it carefully and slipped it into my jacket. Then I went inside. No calls, no reactions, just movement. At 12:37 p.m., I got in the truck and drove straight to the clubhouse. The building sat at the entrance of the subdivision, exactly where it had been since before I bought the property. Brick, white columns, green metal roof, trying to look official without ever actually being it. I walked in without knocking. Karen was behind the front desk, mid-conversation on her phone. She saw me, raised one finger, and kept talking for another minute like I was the one interrupting something important. When she finally hung up, she didn't greet me. "Daniel," she said, flat. "I assume you're here about this morning." "I want 3 things," I said. She leaned back slightly, arms crossing. "Go ahead." "First," I said, pulling a pen from my pocket, "a copy of the notice you claim was sent approving the use of my property for last night's event." She didn't answer immediately, just watched me. "Second," I continued, "the board meeting minutes where that approval was voted on." A flicker. Small. But there. "And third," I finished, "the specific bylaw that gives this HOA authority to assign private residential property as an event location." The room went quiet. Not tense, not loud, just empty of anything she could use. Karen recovered quickly. She always did. "We notified the community," she said. "You were included in that communication." "That's not what I asked." She exhaled slowly, then turned slightly toward the back office. "Linda," she called. A woman in her 60s stepped forward from behind a side desk. She didn't look at me directly, just moved to the computer and started typing. Karen tapped her fingers lightly against the counter. "We'll pull the email," she said. "That should clear this up." Linda printed something, set it down, slid it across the desk. I looked at it. Dated June 14th. Subject line, Summer Gala Announcement. Sent to a list of email addresses, including one I recognized immediately. Mercer72@aol.com. I hadn't used that address in 2 years. I'd updated my contact information with the HOA twice since then. In writing. Linda knew that. Karen knew that. But neither of them said it. "That's not my email," I said. "It's the one we had on file," Karen replied. "It's the one you chose to send to." She didn't respond. Didn't need to. I tapped the paper once with my finger. "Board minutes," I said. "That's internal," she replied. "Not for distribution." I didn't move. The bylaws require disclosure of any board action affecting property rights upon written request. Silence. I flipped the paper over and wrote 3 lines on the back. Request for documentation. Event approval notice. Valid delivery. Board vote records. Applicable bylaw authority. Then I signed it, dated it, and slid it back across the counter. "That's your written request," I said. Karen's smile returned. But it was thinner now, more controlled. "You're overreacting," she said. "This was a community event. People had a good time. The cleanup was already underway before you—" "The cleanup didn't happen," I said. That stopped her, briefly. Your contractor left, I continued, without touching anything. Her eyes narrowed. You told him not to, she said. I told him not to interfere with evidence. There it was again. That word, evidence. It landed differently this time. Karen straightened. This is exactly the kind of hostile behavior the notice addresses, she said. You're escalating a situation that could have been resolved quietly. I'm documenting it. Her expression hardened. Then let me be clear, she said, voice dropping just enough to carry weight. The board will not tolerate intimidation. If this continues, we will proceed with enforcement. That includes fines and, if necessary, a lien against your property. I held her gaze. Put that in writing. She blinked. What? The fine, the lien, the enforcement language you just described. A pause. A calculation. Then something shifted. Not caution, confidence. She thought I was bluffing, thought I was asking for it because I didn't understand what it meant. Of course, she said. She turned, walked to the printer, and started typing. 90 seconds. That's all it took. The machine hummed, then spat out a single page. She signed it with a quick, practiced motion, dated it, and handed it to me. Official HOA letterhead. My name, my address. Accusations. Threats. All of it tied directly to her authority, or what she believed was her authority. I read it once, folded it clean, slipped it into my jacket beside the first notice. Thank you, I said. Karen leaned forward slightly. Daniel, she said, quieter now, you're putting yourself in a difficult position. This doesn't have to become something bigger. I nodded once. I agree. And for the first time since I walked in, that answer didn't give her confidence. It unsettled her, because she didn't know what I meant by it. I turned to leave. Linda was still at the desk, hands resting on the keyboard, not typing. As I passed, she glanced up for half a second. Didn't say anything. Didn't need to. That look told me everything I needed to know. The records existed. They just didn't say what Karen needed them to say. I walked out of the clubhouse, back into the daylight, and stood there for a moment with the papers in my hand. 2 documents, both signed, both dated, both wrong, and both exactly what I needed. I got back in the truck and drove home. Didn't stop anywhere, didn't call anyone, because at this point, the case wasn't missing anything. It was waiting for one thing. Pressure. Karen had made her move. She'd escalated. And when people escalate without a foundation, they don't stabilize. They collapse. The only question now was how far she was willing to go before that happened. Because every step she took from here, every notice, every threat, every signature, wasn't building her position. It was building mine. By the time I got back to the house, the structure of the case had already shifted. This wasn't a dispute anymore. It was an investigation. I set the 2 HOA notices on the kitchen table and opened my laptop. New folder. Lakeshore Pines, primary. Inside it, I created subfolders, clean, simple, deliberate. Property records, HOA communications, event evidence, witnesses, defendants. No clutter, no overlap. Everything had a place. Because once this moved forward, confusion would be the only advantage they had left, and I wasn't giving it to them. I started with what I already controlled. The emails. 11 of them. 3 years. Every refusal documented in writing, each one consistent, each one clear. No ambiguity, no implied consent. I exported them into a single thread, preserved the headers, the timestamps, the routing data, proof of delivery, proof of receipt, proof of intent. Then I moved to the camera footage, 6 hours from the night before, frame by frame. I didn't rush it, didn't skim. I logged each vehicle as it entered, matched license plates to faces, faces to arrival times to the sequence of events on the property. At 5:53 p.m., first confirmed guest entry. At 6:07, catering setup begins. At 6:41, full occupancy on the dock. At 7:12, crowd density peak. Patterns. Everything leaves a pattern, and patterns turn chaos into structure. By midnight, I had 97 confirmed individual entries, 5 commercial vehicles, exactly what I'd estimated the night before. I opened a new document. Defendant index. Started typing, one name at a time, because each of them mattered, not as a group, as individuals. That distinction would decide everything later. At 9:30 the next morning, I made my first call. Martha Jensen answered on the second ring. "Daniel?" she said, voice steady but cautious. I was wondering when someone was going to ask. Martha had lived 2 houses down for over 30 years. She didn't attend HOA meetings. She observed them, quietly, consistently. "I need to ask you about the guest list," I said. A pause, then the sound of a drawer opening. "I thought you might," she replied. I drove over 10 minutes later. Her kitchen smelled like coffee and paper, old paper, the kind that holds on to information longer than people do. She set it on the table between us, folded once, then again. Careful. "Original RSVP sheet," she said. "Karen had me help log confirmations in May." I unfolded it. Names, handwritten, over 100 of them, each with a phone number, each with an address, each tied to a person who had chosen to attend. "I made a copy before I gave it back," Martha added. "Didn't know why at the time, just felt like I should." I looked at her. "You still have the original?" She shook her head. "No, Karen kept that." "Good," I said. She frowned slightly. "Good?" "Yes," I said. "Because now she owns it." That mattered. Control of evidence isn't just about possession, it's about accountability. If Karen held the original list, then she held responsibility for its existence, and I had a verified copy. "I'll need a statement," I said. "Signed, detailing how this list was created, when, and under whose direction." Martha didn't hesitate. "I've been waiting 3 years for someone to ask me that," she said. I left with the copy. And a commitment. That was one. At noon, I knocked on Tyler Brooks's door. He opened it with a file already in his hand. "You're not here about the party," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm here about the meeting." He nodded once and stepped aside. Tyler was one of the few HOA board members who didn't vote the way Karen expected. Not loud, not confrontational, just consistent. He set the file on the table. "Meeting minutes," he said. "April, May, June." I opened them, read them slowly. April, planning discussed, no vote. May, event mentioned, no motion. June, nothing, no approval, no authorization, no legal basis for what Karen had claimed. "She reported it as already arranged," Tyler said. "Didn't ask for a vote, didn't request approval. And no one challenged it," I said. He exhaled. "No one realized what she meant. We thought it was the clubhouse lawn, or the public green." I closed the file. "She never said your address, Paul?" I asked. "Not once." That mattered more than anything, because it meant the board hadn't authorized the event. They'd been bypassed, used. "I need you to confirm this," I said. "Under oath if it gets there." Tyler didn't look away. "I've been waiting for that opportunity," he said. 2. I drove to the county records office next. No appointment. Didn't need one. The clerk recognized the request before I finished speaking. Certified deed, original plat map, 1968 survey lines. She handed them over one at a time. Stamped, sealed, undeniable. Ownership wasn't just clear. It was absolute. No shared access. No community easement. No HOA jurisdiction beyond the road. Everything Karen had claimed didn't exist. I paid the fee, took the documents, didn't open them until I got back to the truck. Not because I doubted them, because I didn't need to. The weight of them in my hand was enough. That quiet certainty, that final authority, that's what courts recognize. I drove back home and laid everything out on the table. Guest list, meeting minutes, deed, plat map, emails, camera logs, 2 signed notices from Karen, each one connected, each one reinforcing the same point. There was no permission. There was no authority. There was only action and responsibility. I created 3 new folders: individual defendants, corporate defendants, primary defendant, Holloway. Then I started sorting: catering company, band, equipment rental, florist, photographer, each with insurance, each with liability, each likely to settle quickly. Then the individuals, residents, guests, neighbors, people who had walked through my gate because someone told them they could. Each one a decision, each one a line crossed. I sat back and looked at the table, at the structure, at the scale, because this wasn't a small case anymore. This wasn't one person against one HOA. This was a network, and every connection in it pointed back to the same source: Karen Holloway. The only thing missing now was pressure. Because evidence builds a case, but pressure forces decisions, and I knew exactly where that pressure was going to land. The only question was how many of them would hold the line once they realized what they were actually standing on. Karen answered that faster than anyone else could have. She called the sheriff. It happened the next morning. I was in the kitchen halfway through organizing the vendor files when I saw the patrol car roll up along the edge of the road. Slow, deliberate, not urgent, not an emergency. A call. I stepped outside before he reached the door. Deputy Cole Bennett stepped out of the cruiser, one hand resting on the frame like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Mid-40s, steady posture, the kind of presence that doesn't waste movement. "Mr. Mercer?" he asked. "That's right." He nodded once and then glanced past me, toward the dock, the lawn, the visible damage still untouched. "We received a report," he said. "Concern about suspicious activity, photography, surveillance behavior that made some residents uncomfortable." I let that sit. Didn't respond immediately. Then I said, "You mean documentation?" His eyes came back to me. "Depends on context," he said. "Then let's establish it," I replied. I turned slightly and gestured toward the house. "I own this property, full title, no shared easements, no HOA access rights beyond the public road." He didn't argue, didn't interrupt, just listened. "I'm documenting damage that occurred during an unauthorized event organized by the HOA president," I continued. "Everything you see here happened without my consent." He looked out again. Longer this time. Took in the broken rail, the burn marks, the flattened beds. Then he asked the only question that mattered. "Do you have documentation of ownership on hand?" "I do." I went inside, returned with a certified copy of the deed and the 1968 plat map. Still in the envelope from the county office. I handed them over. He didn't rush it. Opened the documents, checked the seal, read the description line, parcel boundaries, access points. Then he folded them back carefully and handed them to me. No HOA easement listed, he said. No. No shared use designation. No. He nodded. Then this is a private property matter, he said, not a criminal complaint. There it was. Clean, simple, final. He pulled out a small notepad, wrote something down, then looked back at me. I'll close the report as unfounded, he added. No indication of illegal surveillance. You're documenting your own land. I nodded once. Appreciate that. He turned to leave, then paused. Off the record, he said, lowering his voice slightly. We get calls from that address about once a month. I didn't ask what kind. Didn't need to. Understood, I said. He gave a short nod, got back into the cruiser, and drove off without another word. I stood there for a second, watching the dust settle behind his tires. Then I went back inside, opened a new document. Sheriff Interaction Log, date, time, summary, direct quote, unfounded. Because that mattered, not just for the record, for the pattern. Karen wasn't just overstepping, she was using authority as leverage, calling in pressure where she didn't have jurisdiction. And now that pressure had been documented and dismissed. That changed the balance. By early afternoon, the message had already started moving through the neighborhood. I didn't hear it directly. I saw it. Cars slowed as they passed the house. People looked. Not curious anymore. Careful. That shift is easy to miss if you're not looking for it. The moment when confidence turns into uncertainty. When people start asking themselves questions they should have asked before they showed up. I went back to the footage, reviewed the entries again, matched 3 more faces to names from Martha's list, confirmed phone numbers, addresses, every connection tightening. At 2:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring twice, then answered. Daniel Mercer. Silence for half a second. Then a voice. Male. Controlled but strained. This is Greg Patterson. I didn't respond. I wanted to talk about the other night, he continued. There's been some confusion about what people were told. I think it's important You took a photo of my truck, I said. Pause. Yes, he admitted. I was documenting. You documented your presence on my property, I said. That helps me. Another pause. Longer this time. That's not what I meant, he said. I know, I replied. Silence again. Then more direct this time. What are you planning to do with all this? He asked. There it was. The first real question. Not denial, not defense. Concern. I'm organizing it, I said. That doesn't answer the question. It does. He exhaled. Look, Daniel, nobody intended for this to get out of hand. Karen said, I'm not discussing Karen, I said. I'm discussing actions. His tone shifted, not aggressive, but firmer. You're going to hurt a lot of people if you take this further, he said. I leaned back slightly, letting the words settle. Then I answered. They hurt themselves when they walked through that gate. Silence. He didn't have a response for that, because there wasn't one. I'd advise you to talk to a lawyer, he said finally. I will, I replied. And Greg? Yes? Make sure they're good. I ended the call, set the phone down, and added his name to the top of the individual defendant list. Not because he called, because of what he'd already done. The call just confirmed something else. They were starting to realize, starting to see the edges of what this actually was. Not a complaint, not a disagreement, a case. And cases don't care about intentions. They care about facts. By 4 p.m., I had everything updated. Witness statements pending. Documents verified. Footage cataloged. Not perfect, but complete enough. Enough to move forward. I stepped outside again, walked down toward the dock, and stood at the edge where the rail had broken. The lake was still. Quiet again. Like it had already moved on, I hadn't. Not yet. Because this wasn't the end of the escalation, it was the turning point. Karen had used the sheriff. It didn't work. She'd issued threats. They'd been documented. Now the system had started responding. Not to her, to me. And once that happens, once the structure shifts, it doesn't shift back. I looked out across the water for another second, then turned back toward the house. Because the next move wasn't going to be quiet. It was going to be public. And when it happened, everyone who stepped onto that property that night was going to understand exactly what they'd agreed to, whether they meant to or not. Karen made sure of that. The notice went out 2 days later. Emergency HOA meeting. Mandatory attendance encouraged. Subject: hostile resident behavior at 18 Mercer Shore Drive. My address. Again. She didn't just want control. She wanted an audience. I parked on the public lot at 6:42 p.m. Same rule as before. Stay outside their authority. Observe first. Act second. The clubhouse was already full. Cars packed the gravel, some I recognized from the footage. Same plates. Same people who had walked across my land without asking the simplest question. Inside, voices layered over each other. Confusion. Concern. A little bit of anger, but not yet directed at the right place. I walked in alone. No announcement. No hesitation. Took a seat in the front row, where they couldn't ignore me. Karen stood at the front behind a folding table flanked by the rest of the board. Greg was there. Tyler sat at the far end, quiet as ever. She saw me. Paused. Just long enough to register that I wasn't where she expected me to be. Then she smiled, recovered, and started talking. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "I know tensions have been high after last weekend, and I want to address concerns about a resident who has chosen to escalate what should have been a community celebration." There it was, the framing. She spoke for 20 minutes, didn't rush, didn't stumble. She described me as uncooperative, difficult, detached from the community. She held up photos, my dock, my lawn, but described the damage like it had been caused by neglect. By me. She referenced the email she'd sent. The wrong one. She mentioned the notice she'd issued, the one in my jacket pocket. She never mentioned the banner, never mentioned the guest list, never mentioned that the property wasn't hers to use. When she finished, she folded her hands neatly on the table. "Before we proceed with a vote on enforcement," she said, "I'd like to offer Mr. Mercer the opportunity to respond." Polite, measured, calculated, like she was giving me a chance to defend myself. I stood, didn't walk forward, didn't take the floor, just stayed where I was. "My name is Daniel Mercer," I said. "I own the property at 18 Mercer Shore Drive." A ripple moved through the room, small, but noticeable. I opened the leather portfolio in my hand. Inside were envelopes, white, sealed, each one labeled. "I'm not here to respond," I said. Karen's smile tightened. "Then why are you here?" she asked. I lifted the first envelope. "Because each of you is." The room shifted, confusion first, then attention. I read the name printed on the corner. Mr. and Mrs. Howard Ellis. A couple in the third row looked up. I walked to them, handed them the envelope. They took it without speaking. I didn't explain, didn't pause, just turned. Mark Jensen. Another name. Another envelope, another step. By the 5th, people were leaning forward. By the 10th, someone opened theirs. Paper slid out. Eyes scanned, then widened. "Is this—" a man started. "Yes," I said before he finished. I kept going, name after name, each one tied to a person who had walked through my gate. Each one now holding a civil summons. Trespass, property damage, liability. By the 20th, the room was no longer quiet. Whispers, questions. Someone stood. "This isn't real," they said. I didn't answer, just read the next name. By the 30th, a woman near the back started crying. Not loud, but enough. Because she understood. This wasn't a warning. It wasn't a bluff. It was process. Documented. Filed. Irreversible. I reached Greg Patterson. He was already standing, waiting. I handed him his envelope. He took it slower than the others. Didn't open it. Just looked at it. Then at me. No smile this time. No confidence. Just calculation. I moved on. Karen hadn't said a word. Not once. She stood at the front, hands on the table, watching her room change. Because it was her room, her people, her support, and now they were something else. By the 50th envelope, voices were rising. "You told us this was approved. This is insane. What is this?" I kept reading names. Didn't respond. Didn't engage. Because this wasn't a conversation. It was a transfer. Of responsibility. Of consequence. Of reality. By the 70th, people were moving toward the exits. Some left without taking their envelopes. I left them on their chairs, because service didn't require acceptance, just delivery. By the 90th, the room had thinned. The noise had changed. Less confusion. More fear. More anger. Directed now. Not at me. At her. I reached the final stack. One envelope left. Thicker. Different seal, no list. Just a name. Karen Holloway. I walked to the front, stopped at the table. She didn't move, didn't reach for it. "What is this?" she asked finally. Her voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't steady anymore. "This," I said, placing it in front of her, "is yours." She didn't touch it. I left it there, turned back to the room. "Each of you will be formally served within the next 48 hours, I said. "What you're holding is a copy. Read it. Then call a lawyer." Silence. Complete this time. Because now they understood. This wasn't about a party. It wasn't about a misunderstanding. It was about 100 individual decisions, all tied to one event, all documented, all moving forward. I closed the portfolio, sat back down, didn't say anything else. The board didn't vote, didn't discuss, didn't continue. The meeting was over before anyone formally ended it. People stood, slow at first, then all at once, leaving, holding envelopes like they weighed more than paper. Karen stayed where she was, still behind the table, still not touching the one in front of her. Greg was gone. Tyler hadn't moved. I sat there for another minute, then stood, walked out the same way I came in. No confrontation, no noise, just movement, because the explosion had already happened. And now, all that was left was what came after. And what came after was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that meant resolution. The kind that meant people were thinking, calculating, calling lawyers. The first call came the next morning at 8:12 a.m. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Daniel Mercer." "This is Andrew Keller," the voice said, controlled, professional. I represent Summit Peak Catering. My client was present at your property on June 28th. Straight to it. No denial. No confusion. We received the documents, he continued. We'd like to discuss resolution. I leaned back in the chair, letting the words settle. How quickly? I asked. A pause. Immediately, he said. That told me everything. Businesses don't wait when liability is clear. They close, they contain, they move on. I'll send terms, I said. Written. Understood. The call ended. No argument, no negotiation, just alignment. By noon, 2 more vendors reached out. The band, the rental company. Same tone, same urgency. Each one understood the exposure. Each one wanted distance. I created a new folder. Settlements. Corporate. Because that's what they were now. Not defendants, not participants. Just liabilities looking for an exit. By the second day, 3 agreements were already in draft. Confidential. Fast. Clean. Predictable. The individuals didn't move as quickly. They hesitated. Some ignored it. Some called. Most didn't know what to do. At 3:47 p.m., Greg Patterson called again. This time there was no hesitation in his voice. What do you want? He asked. Direct. Better. I want you to read what you were given, I said. I did. Then you know. Silence. Then, Karen told us it was approved, he said. That it was community property. That we had access rights. I know what she told you. That matters. It explains, I said. It doesn't remove responsibility. Another pause. Longer. We didn't know, he said. I let that sit. Because that's what they all believed. That not knowing protected them. That's something your attorney can argue, I said. In the right setting. You're really doing this, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes. The line went quiet again. Then, this is going to ruin people, he said. I looked at the files spread across the desk. The photos, the damage, the notices Karen had signed, the list she had built. They ruined themselves, I said. He didn't respond. Hung up without saying anything else. By the 3rd day, the pressure started shifting. Not toward me, toward her. I saw it in the messages, group threads I hadn't left, neighbors asking questions, screenshots of the summons, confusion turning into something sharper. Who approved this? Was this legal? Why are we being sued? Karen didn't answer. Not publicly, not directly. But she made one move, and it was the one I'd been waiting for. The lien. It arrived by courier at 9:03 a.m. formal, stamped, filed with the county. Lakeshore Pines HOA versus Daniel Mercer. Amount, $50,000. Grounds, property damage, unauthorized event disruption, hostile conduct. I read it once, then set it down on the table, next to the other documents, the notices, the emails, the witness statements, because this wasn't a new development. It was confirmation. She'd escalated again, not carefully, not strategically, but emotionally. And emotional decisions leave marks. This one left a permanent one, recorded, filed, public. I picked up the phone and called Maria. She answered on the first ring. Tell me you saw it, she said. I did. Do you want to respond immediately? No, I said. I want to use it. She didn't ask how, didn't need to. Maria had worked with me long enough to understand timing. Understood, she said. We're ready when you are. I ended the call and added the lien to a new folder, titled Defamation, because that's what it was, not enforcement, not protection. A false claim against recorded ownership. One of the fastest ways to shift a case from defense to offense. By that afternoon, I had a new structure: trespass, property damage, fraudulent lien, abusive process, each one layered, each one supported, each one building on the last. The lake outside was still, unchanged, like none of it had happened. But inside the system, everything had. I stepped out onto the porch, looked toward the dock, and let the silence settle in again. Different this time. Heavier. Because now the movement wasn't visible. It was procedural. Filings, responses, deadlines. The kind of momentum that doesn't stop once it starts. Karen had made her final move. She just didn't know it yet. Because from here, there was no more room for narrative, no more room for interpretation. Only record. And record doesn't favor the person who wrote the story. It favors the person who proved it. And I was done collecting. Now, I was ready to present. I didn't rush it. Didn't file immediately. Because timing isn't about speed. It's about impact. I waited 3 days, long enough for the lien to circulate, long enough for the fear to settle in, long enough for the first wave of settlements to finalize. By then, the pressure had already started fracturing the structure Karen thought she controlled. 31 defendants had settled quietly, most of them businesses, fast payments, confidential terms, exit. They understood the math. The rest didn't. Not yet. I filed on a Tuesday morning, 8:17 a.m. County Clerk's Office, 101 individual complaints, numbered, indexed, each one tied to a name, a timestamp, a documented entry onto my property, trespass, damage, liability. And at the center of it, Karen Holloway, primary defendant, fraudulent lien, abusive process, defamation of title. Everything she had signed, now attached, now exposed, now permanent. Maria handled the processing. I didn't stay, didn't need to. Because once it's filed, it moves on its own. Service began the next morning. Deputies, licensed processors, certified delivery. No one could ignore it now. Not by deleting emails, not by pretending it was a misunderstanding. Because this wasn't communication anymore. It was legal action. And legal action doesn't wait for acknowledgement. It enforces it. The calls changed after that. No more hesitation. No more questions about what this was. They knew. They just wanted out. How do we resolve this? What are you asking for? Is there a way to settle before court? Different voices, same tone, controlled panic. I didn't answer most of them. Not directly. Everything went through written channels, documented, tracked. Because this wasn't negotiation. Not yet. It was positioning. Karen didn't call. She didn't send messages. She didn't try to explain. But she made one more move, and it was the one that ended it. 2 days after the filings, Rick came back. Not through the gate, through the side access, public road edge, the same boundary I had pointed out to him before. Only this time, he crossed it. I watched it happen on the camera. Live. The truck pulled up. 3 men again. Same equipment. Same purpose, but this time, no hesitation. They moved straight toward the hosta line. The ones I'd planted along the property edge. 18 plants. 3 seasons of growth. He didn't trim them. Didn't clean them. He cut them. Down to the root. Loaded them into the truck. One by one. Deliberate. Documented. Then the bobcat rolled forward. 2 feet onto the grass. Then 4. Tracks pressed into the soil. Clear. Undeniable. The operator backed out after the second pass, but the damage was done. I didn't go outside, didn't stop them, didn't intervene. Because intervention ends documentation, and I wasn't ending anything. I let it run, every second, every angle, every movement. Rick stepped out at the end, took out his phone, photographed the cleared area, proof of completion, sent it to Karen. I knew he would, because that's what he always did. Work, report, move on. He didn't realize he'd just added himself to the case, personally. I waited until they left. Then I reviewed the footage, tagged it, time-stamped it, exported it, added it to a new folder, additional violations, post-notice, because that's what made it irreversible. Not the original trespass, not the party, not even the lien. This intentional entry, after warning, after documentation, after escalation, that's what courts don't overlook. I texted Maria one line. Add Holloway R, individual liability. Her response came back in under a minute. Done. That was it. No explanation needed, no discussion, because the structure had just changed again, from defense to dominance. Karen still hadn't spoken, but her actions had. Loud enough, clear enough, final. I sat back at the table and looked at the full file, every piece, every connection, every escalation, from the moment the valet stopped my truck to the moment Rick crossed the line again. It was complete. Not just a case, a sequence, a pattern, a narrative supported by evidence. And narratives, when they're backed by record, don't get argued, they get ruled on. I closed the folder, because there was nothing left to add. No missing pieces, no unanswered questions. Karen had built it herself. Every step, every decision, every signature. The lien was her biggest move. But this was the mistake that made it irreversible. Because now, there was no version of events she could present that didn't collapse under its own weight. Court wasn't going to be a fight. It was going to be a formality. And she didn't know that yet. But she was about to. Court didn't feel dramatic. No raised voices. No last-minute arguments. Just a room built for clarity. Judge Eleanor Grant sat at the center, already flipping through the filings before anyone spoke. She didn't rush. She didn't react. She read. That was the first shift. Because this wasn't going to be about persuasion. It was going to be about record. Karen sat 2 rows ahead of me, still composed, still dressed like control was something she could wear. Rick beside her. Quiet now. No phone. No notes. Just still. Their attorney stood when called. Confident posture. Measured tone. He tried to frame it early. Your Honor, this is a dispute between a homeowner and an association. Judge Grant didn't even look up. It's a trespass case, she said, flipping a page. With 101 named defendants and a recorded lien. Proceed carefully. That was the second shift. Language matters, and she had already defined it. They pivoted, tried to argue misunderstanding, implied permission, community use, temporary access. Every version softer than the last, but every version collapsed the moment it touched the evidence. Maria didn't speak much. She didn't need to. She just introduced the sequence. Video, time-stamped, gate footage, license plates, entry logs. Then the RSVP list, printed. Names matched, faces confirmed. Each one tied to a moment. A step onto my property, without permission, without legal basis. Then the documents. My deed. Filed. Clear. Boundary lines defined down to the inch. Water rights attached. Exclusive use. No easements granted. No access rights assigned. Nothing ambiguous. Karen's attorney tried to interrupt. Your Honor, the HOA had reasonable belief. Based on what document? Judge Grant asked. Silence. Not long. Just enough. Proceed, she said. Maria moved forward. HOA bylaws. No clause granting authority over private lakefront parcels. No vote recorded. No approval documented. Then Karen's notice. Signed. On HOA letterhead. Threatening fines. Claiming authority. Without basis. Then the lien. Filed. Against my property. $50,000. No judgment. No court order. Just assertion. Judge Grant stopped there. Looked up for the first time. At any point, she asked, did you verify ownership before filing this lien? Karen's attorney hesitated. Then, we relied on internal records. Not filed records, the judge pressed. No, Your Honor. That was the third shift, because now it wasn't about defense. It was about exposure. Maria didn't slow down. She introduced the final piece. Rick's entry, post-notice, post-warning, clear boundary violation. Video played, no sound needed. The room watched. The cut plants, the machine tracks, the line crossed, again. Judge Grant leaned back slightly. Not surprised, just finished. Is there any argument, she asked, that this entry was authorized? No one answered, because there wasn't one. She closed the file, not loudly, just enough to mark it. Then we're not dealing with confusion, she said. We're dealing with repeated unauthorized entry, documented damage, and an unlawful lien placed without due diligence. She paused, looked directly at Karen, individually and collectively. That was it. No dramatic buildup, no delay, just decision. Judgment for the plaintiff. The words landed clean, precise. Each named defendant is liable for trespass and associated damages, up to $100,000 per claim, subject to individual assessment. Murmurs, low, sharp, contained. But they were there. Primary liability, she continued, rests with Ms. Holloway, whose actions initiated and escalated the conduct. Additional penalties apply for fraudulent lien and abuse of process. Karen didn't move, didn't react. But something shifted. Not physically, structurally, because the position she'd been standing on was gone. Mr. Holloway, the judge added, glancing at Rick, is individually liable for subsequent violations. Final, complete, no gaps, no openings. Court is adjourned. That was it. No second act, no reversal, just consequence. Outside, the calls started immediately, faster than before, urgent now, different tone, not negotiation, resolution. But I didn't answer them, not right away, because the system had already done what it was supposed to do. It had clarified, it had confirmed, it had closed the argument. Weeks later, the lake was quiet again. No banners, no lists, no strangers pretending access was permission. Just water. Still. The dock repaired, the grass growing back where it had been cut. The line, clear again. Martha stopped by one afternoon, stood at the edge, looked out across the water. Feels like it belongs to itself again, she said. I nodded. Because that's what ownership actually is. Not control, not force, just clarity, defined, respected, enforced when necessary. Karen's house went up for sale before the season ended. No announcement, no explanation, just a listing. The HOA board dissolved quietly after that. Replaced. Reduced. Limited. Because once authority gets exposed, it doesn't come back the same. I sat on the dock that evening. Same place they'd stood. Same place they'd celebrated something that was never theirs. Only now, there was nothing to prove, nothing to defend, nothing to document. Just quiet. The kind that doesn't get taken, because it's already been established. And this time, it stayed that way.
The lesson here isn't about winning a fight, it's about knowing what's yours, proving it's the right way, and having the patience to let the truth carry the weight. I didn't stop that situation with force or anger. I stopped it by documenting everything, standing on what was written, and letting the law do what it's meant to do. When you stay steady and rowdy fast, you don't have to raise your voice because the record speaks for you. There's a kind of quiet strength in that, not the kind that's pushed back cloudy, but the kind that holds it flat without moving an inch. Out here, land isn't just property, it's history, responsibility, and something you protect by respecting the rules that define it. If you ever deal with someone overstepping boundaries, whether it's land, right, or just plain respect, go ahead and robot justice in the comments. I read everyone, and I know a lot of you have stories just like this. And if you believe in staying your ground the right way, without noise, without shortcuts, subscribe and stick around. There's more stories like this ahead, and they are all about keeping what matters, the way it was meant to be.